Good evening once again to everyone out there in the internet world. We are continuing with a very dramatic and interesting story today in chapter 17 and 18 in the book of Samuel. It is none other than the story of David and Goliath. This is one of the most well-known stories in the Bible, and it is a well-known story in people's minds and knowledge of the Bible in the world. Everyone knows what David and Goliath is about. They think they know, and what it represents. So we're going to study it in depth in this chapter, and we're going to learn what actually is the most fundamental aspect of the story. The story begins, in order to understand the story, we have a little map. Now we're going to need this map to appreciate that if you look at this map, it says, upper left side, it says Gath. All right? The red represents the Philistines. And the blue represents the Israelites camp. Okay? Gath, okay, that's Gat. And that is one of the cities of the Philistines. Remember, if we have a map of Israel, then in our minds, let's say modern day Gaza, okay, and modern day Ashkelon, all right, the southwest part of Israel, which is off the coast, up to Ashdod, and maybe as you go east and north, then you get to this stream of the Elah stream going towards Jerusalem, and you hit Beit Shemesh, more or less. And on this, the Philistines kept encroaching, kept moving and moving, and you see to the right, it says to Judea, and to the left, it says to Gath. So this is a border between ancient, Israelites with Saul and the tribes, and the Philistines, who kept getting more and more power. And they're camped next to each other. Now let's look at it in modern day. This is what it looks like. Hold on. Okay. This is what it looks like today. Now, we're looking from the Israelite side. So therefore, on the upper right is Gath. Right? If you keep going right or beyond that, you'll get to the Mediterranean. Okay. Whereas if you go to the left all the way, you're going to get to Jerusalem. So think about us looking from the north. Okay. We're on this mountain range where the Israelite camp is, and you see the brown in front of you. That's the valley of Elah. Nowadays, that's where they do agriculture. Okay. The valley of Elah is where the battle took place. Now, if you look at the hills beyond, that's where the Philistine camp is. And the hills where we are, that's where the Israelite camp is. There's another set of hills called Azekah. And if you take the road, basically, from in between Azekah and us, and you take it to the right, you get to Beit Shemesh. Okay, so this is the setting of where we're going to have our dramatic story of David fighting against Goliath. Now think about this. Everyone who is on this mountain, this close mountain in the green, is Israelites defending the border against the Philistines, who keep coming from the south and who want to take over all of Israel. And they need to make a stand. And therefore, this place represents the battle, the great battle, which will determine the course of whether the Israelites stay where they are and defend their borders, or are they kicked out. So we have it. Now I want you to notice, we're going to talk a little bit about this place called Khirbet Kayafa, this little circular, it's called a tell. Okay, it's amazing because it was a discovery in the last 15 years. Okay, people didn't really know much about it, or they didn't really look into it. Now, you'd think, it looks like this one over here. It's just, trees that grew on top of a little mountain, trees that grew on top of a mountain. Who knows what would happen if archaeologists started looking and digging over here? But they dug here, okay? And what they found was a whole city. Did I not bring that city here? I thought I brought the city. If you see, there's a little wall here, and it's a circular city. Okay, so is that the place where the Israelites were camped and waiting for and to fight against the Philistines? Quite possibly, which is cool that archaeology works like that. These are just random pictures of things that we're going to be discussing. The size difference between David and Goliath, and the sling that David uses, or something similar to a sling. It had 5 stones, not 3. But this is something that we're going to, obviously, we're going to see the real message of this story, which has nothing to do with the sharp throwing acumen of David, or the strategy of what Goliath was doing wrong, but the message that comes through this story. Okay, so chapter 17 says the following: the Philistines assemble their forces for battle, and they stand at Socho of Judah, and are there between Socho and Azekah, which is amazing. Today, okay, here's Socho, and here's Azekah. By the way, Socho is today called Givat HaTurmusim. We go with our families, and we go, there are these beautiful lupines, purple lupines, that we go and see at different parts of the year. So we know where Socho is, and we know where Azekah is. And the Navi is telling us that's exactly where they were at that time. Where was Saul? Saul and his men were camped in the valley of Elah. It's unlikely that they were in a valley. You always want to have higher ground. So we'll figure it out. And the next verse says, Philistines were on one hill, and Israel was on the opposite hill, and the ravine was beneath them. Right? That's exactly right over here, right in between. All of a sudden, the champion of the Philistine forces steps forward. His name was Goliath from Gath. And his height was 6 cubits and plus. Now, what's 6 cubits? Shesh amot. Now, ma is around a 1.5 feet. So that's 9 feet. What's 9 feet? He was 3 meters tall. 3 meters tall as a giant. And not only was he a giant, 3 meters tall, but he also had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a breastplate of scale armor and a bronze breastplate weighing 5,000 shekels. He had bronze greave on his legs and bronze javelin from his shoulders, and the shaft of his spear, an iron-headed spear, weighed 600 shekels. I mean, he was a tank. This giant with armor. He was invincible. Physically, he was invincible. And he basically said, listen, guys, verse 8, he called out to the Israel and he said to them, why should you come? Why do we have to do this battle? I am Goliath. Okay? And I basically am in the champion here. And you have a champion who, you remember your king is Saul. So let's have it out. I'll battle against Saul. 9, if he bests me in combat and kills me, then we will become your slaves. But if I defeat him, then you shall be our slaves. So this is an interesting way, and very elegant way, to prevent bloodshed, right? Unfortunately, Saul wasn't too thrilled about this idea. Goliath was also doing something, and he says what I'm doing in verse 10. I herewith defy the ranks of Israel. Get me a man and let's fight it out. He's not saying defy. Defy is not the right word. He's merely saying insult, right? He's basically insulting the Israeli army. But okay, so you can insult the Israeli army. But once you do that, you're really insulting the God of Israel. Okay, and that's what David's going to focus on. Well, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were terror-stricken. Now, this is not what you want to hear from your king. What you want to hear from your king, you want to see your king going out and fighting against him. And I imagine, had Saul gone out and fought against him, he would have defeated him. After all, God is fighting on the side of the Israelites. But Saul was too frightened. And Saul, therefore, kind of recoils into himself. And this was another comment on Saul. You know, he was supposed to be the great white hope. He was supposed to be the one who was going to defend the people. If anything, that's what he was supposed to do. Comes along Goliath, and he says, fight me. And Saul goes yellow. Okay. Now, contrasting this is verse 12. David, and it's a good translation, right? And David, but David, was the son of a certain person from Ephrat of Bethlehem in Judah, whose name was Jesse. He had 8 sons. And Jesse was very old by then, so he sent out 3 of his sons, the oldest sons, and David was the youngest, 3 of his oldest sons, to go to a battle. That's what he did. His eldest was Eliav. His second eldest was Avinadav. And the third one was Shammah. Verse 14 says David was the youngest. So he wasn't allowed to go, but he had to stay home, verse 15, and mind the flock of his father in Bethlehem. He was a shepherd. So you can imagine, right? David, this young, weak, redhead who liked to play the harp, hears that there's a battle brewing. Now he's in Beit Lechem. You know, it's a day's travel to get from Beit Lechem. It's probably 20 kilometers. So that Beit Lechem to Valley of Elah, although it's downhill. And David is, he hears about it. Why does he hear about it? Look in verse 16. Every day for 40 days, Goliath would stand up and he would say, who's ready to fight me? You guys are such cowards. Where's your king? Where's your holy God of Israel? All of these things Goliath kept making. He kept mocking them. And David heard about it. But he wasn't allowed to do anything because he was watching mending the flock. Then one day, in verse 17, Jesse says to his son, take some food to your brothers who are at the battle, at the front lines. Take food, take bread, take milk, take all these things. Basically, that's apparently all David was good for. Verse 19, Saul and his brothers and all the men of Israel, Saul and the brothers and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, preparing, maybe there were small skirmishes, but, there was still basically Goliath doing was, mocking everyone. And David can't handle it. He leaves all the stuff in verse 22, and he runs towards the battle to greet his brothers. And while he's talking to his brothers, seeing how they're doing, he sees Goliath and he hears what he has to say. And David heard, verse 23 says, And everyone, when they saw Goliath and when they heard him, they ran away. But David didn't. He stands firm. He looks up. And he hears very, very clearly what Goliath is saying. Now, verse 25. The men of Israel were saying, do you see that man coming out? He's coming out to embarrass Israel, to defy us, to destroy us. Everyone's running away. And I heard from a good authority that the one who beats him, who kills him, the king will be very, very wealthy and will give his daughter as a wife. Now, David hears this, and he goes to some other men, and no one's doing anything. So he hears that there's embarrassing things that this guy is saying, and everyone is frightened, and everyone's trembling, and he's not able to do anything. They're not able to do anything. So he says, don't you know what will happen to the man who removes this disgrace from Israel? We need to do something. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he dares defy the ranks of the living God? And this is where the key to this story is. We in Judaism have a concept called Chilul Hashem. Chilul Hashem means when you disrespect, desecrate the name of God. And usually we mean you do an act and people will say, but here it's the definition. Goliath is standing up and he's saying, I hereby desecrate the name of God. So David can't handle that. He's visibly, troubled by it, and he's shocked that no one else is able to do anything. Now, David is getting all kind of bent out of shape, and his brother comes over to him. And he says, who the heck are you? You had one job. Your job was to take care of the cattle. And this is what you're doing. You left your animal, you left all the flock, and you just wanted to come and see, the front lines, to see the battle. That's totally irresponsible. And David responds, what have I done here? Look, this is a serious thing. This is the most important thing. You think that the flock is important? This will tell the future of the children of Israel. He turns away from him, and he keeps going back and forth, and he keeps asking people, who is going to be the one to go and fight against Goliath? And they all give him the same answer. Now, this is a strange scene. You have King Saul, he's in the back in his tent. And he hears that there's some kind of ruckus in the camp because this young man, David, is getting all upset, and he's running up and down, and he's saying, something has to be done, someone has to do something. So he says, what's going on there? Let me speak to this man, this young boy. And he's brought to Shaul. And Shaul says, what are you doing? You're making people upset. You're making people nervous. No one can fight against this guy. And David says the following words in verse 32. I will go. Your servant will go. I will fight with this Philistine. Okay, so he doesn't call him by name. He calls him in a derogatory manner because that's how you have to act towards someone who's coming to disrespect and desecrate the name of God. And David says, I will do it. Saul looks at this, I don't know how tall he was, but let's say he was, 1.5 meters, like this nothing, and this little kid. And he says to them, you can't go fight against the Philistine. You're a boy. He's a fighter, a warrior. He's been a warrior all his life. Now David says, well, King Saul, okay, I am a shepherd, and I, as a shepherd, have one job, and that's to protect the flock And if a bear comes or a lion comes and takes one sheep, I will go after him and I will kill that animal, save my flock, because that is my job. That is my responsibility. Even the lion and the bear I will do. And now this Philistine, uncircumcised, he will become like one of them because he has desecrated the name of God. Therefore, in verse 37, the same God who saved me from the lion and from the bear, he will save me from this Philistine. Shaul says, "Go, David, and God will be with you," which means that David has somehow inspired Shaul. And that's the beauty, that's the magic of David. That he was a magnetic personality, he was a passionate young man, and people understood that regardless of the fact that he was small and didn't look like a warrior, he was filled with so much passion. And he was filled with so much confidence, because it wasn't his own confidence. It was the confidence that God will fight on my behalf, just like he fought when I was protecting the flock. So of course, I will protect the flock, which is metaphorically the flock of Israel. Now Saul says, "Go, and God will be with you." I wonder what Saul was thinking. Was he thinking, all right, let this kid die? Was he inspired? Navi doesn't tell us. He just says, "Go." So here in verse 38, they said, well, at least you better wear some armor. So they put, Saul gives David his own armor. Remember, Saul's double his size. And helmet. And the protective armor. And David says, "I can't even walk, it's so heavy." David says, "I don't want any of it." David takes away all the armor. He can't even lift Saul's sword. So David instead, verse 40, okay, he takes his stick, he takes a few smooth stones from the valley, he puts them in his pocket, takes his sling, and he goes towards the Philistine. The Philistine sees that someone's approaching him. Remember, they're in a plain on the Elah Valley. And the Philistine starts coming closer with his shield bearer, like someone who is holding, whenever you're going into battle, you have a sidekick, you have a helper there. And David's coming all by himself. So when the Philistines sees that the Israelites sent this David, this young boy, who, by the way, verse 42, was ruddy and handsome, which is, he made fun of him. He says, he literally made fun of him. He said, "Am I a dog that you come against me with sticks?" So the Philistines cursed David by his gods, which is a big, big curse, right? He's using God, the Israelite God's name, to curse David. So that was, once again, desecrating God. So in verse 44, the Philistines said to David, "Come here and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. This is embarrassing. I'll eat you for breakfast." And David responds, and I believe here is the key to the whole story. David says to the Philistine, "You come with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, who stands and represents the ranks and the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. Today This very day, God will deliver you into my hands. I will kill you. I will cut off your head and give your carcasses of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the beasts, and everyone will know that there is a God in Israel. And this whole assembly will know that the Lord can give victory without a sword and a spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver you into our hands. Now think about the confidence that David has. He's a young, scrawny kid who has little armed warfare training. But one thing he knew for sure, it is not possible that God can allow this desecration to go on. And that kind of surety gave him the confidence to be absolutely clear and perhaps set Goliath off his guard a little bit. Like, have someone speak in such harsh terms who clearly in a physical matchup, there's no comparison, nothing whatsoever. And then as Goliath starts approaching, David starts running. Can you imagine? Goliath, by the way, he was approaching very, very slowly. He's a giant. He's wearing very, very heavy chainmail, very, very heavy helmet. He's a giant. He can't move very fast. David, on the other hand, is running really, really quickly. David, at this time that he's running, sends his hand into his pocket, picks up a stone, puts it in his sling, and shoots it towards the Philistine, and it hits him in his forehead, and it gets stuck in his forehead, and he falls on his face. Then David struck him down, killed him with no sword. And David runs up and stands over the Philistine, grasps the Philistine's sword, and cut off his head. Now, that took unbelievable strength in order for David to use the Philistine's own sword. And obviously everyone else was in shock, right? There was no battle going on at the time. They were so confident, the Philistines, that Goliath was indestructible. And therefore, the notion that someone could best him, someone could make him fall, that was unheard of. So much so that the moment, in verse 55, the moment, that David lifts up his head, verse 52, the men of Israel and Judah, the Philistines starts running away. They see that our Goliath is dead. Obviously, this man is going to kill us all. So the men of Israel and Judah rise up with a war cry and pursue the Philistines all the way to the gates of Ekron. The Philistines fell mortally wounded along the road to Sha'araim, up to Gath and Ekron. And the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines and looted their camp, and David takes the head of the Philistine and brings it to Jerusalem and puts it in his tent. And when Saul saw David going out to assault the Philistine, he asked his army commander, Abner, "Who is that boy, Abner?" And Abner replies, "I have absolutely no idea." Now, this is strange, right? Because isn't Saul the one who told David to go in the first place? When David returned after killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him to Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And he said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse from Bethlehem." Now, what we're seeing here, obviously, is the rise of the son of David, who will who is secretly, by the way, king of Israel, right? But no one knows that. And publicly, he is, not what anyone would believe. Here, God is teaching us a message. Lo v'chayil, v'lo v'koach, ki im beruchi. It is not about weapons, and is not about power, but it is about spirit. Israel fights their battles with God, through God, and they do not fight it with weapons and with strength. If it were up to weapons and strength, Israel would lose to its enemies. But because they have faith, as David shows everyone, and because they are zealous to defend the honor of God for those who desecrate God's name, then God, even with the smallest stone, will find the forehead of the greatest giant, defeat him, make him fall, and David will will cut off his head, and show the Philistines that this man did not deserve to have the title or to even be buried with his own head. There's a tradition that there is a place in Khirbet Chanot, in one of the tells on the way to Jerusalem, where there's tradition that that's where Goliath's head is buried, and anyone who walked by would throw a stone on it, as if to make one last derision of Goliath. And to this day, it's like this mound of stones. No one's done the research and the dig, but that's the tradition. Now, the story is amazing, and the story teaches us about the modesty, the humility, and the clarity of David as he is defending against the honor of God. At the same time, it's teaching us of how Saul is losing his grip. Right? He was the one, on the one hand, who didn't go into battle, and he's the one who sent David, probably assuming he'll just get killed, and he didn't care. And when David was successful, he turns to Abner, and he says, "Who is that?" He didn't even know. And this is the beginning of a sordid relationship, really somewhat of a split personality relationship that Saul will have, due to the fact that Saul is getting mentally more ill every day. And that's going to be the topic of the next chapters, where Saul, on the one hand, loves David for what he's done, but on the other hand, is incensed and in jealousy with David for who he is. And that dichotomy is going to play itself out tragically over the next 10 chapters that we're going to study together. So there is the story of David and Goliath, and it all takes place right here in the valley of Elah, where you can go and visit, and perhaps right here in this archaeological tell called Sha'arayim, mentioned in the place with two gates, and they actually found two gates in this tell, which is very unusual. And we get to see the Bible, the verses of the Bible, unfold before our very eyes. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful week, and I look forward to studying with you next week as well.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.